Sir, as I said, I am Dr. Beaumont. We are on university property and have done nothing wrong.
Ma'am, I need you to lower the phone and step away.
Officer Patricia Whitmore had been with the Riverside, California Police Department for 14 years. And in those 14 years, she'd compiled a record that should have raised immediate concerns. 19 complaints, 16 of them involving African American citizens. A black physician at the University Medical Center, accused of not having proper authorization to park in the staff lot. An African American attorney in the downtown professional district questioned about whether she actually worked in the building she was entering. A black real estate developer in the historic district detained for suspicious behavior while inspecting property he owned. Each one involved an African American professional in a predominantly white setting. Each one followed the same script. Officer Whitmore couldn't believe black people belonged in positions of authority, owned valuable property, or had legitimate business in affluent areas. Each complaint ended identically. Implicit bias training that Whitmore attended, but never applied. Cultural sensitivity workshops that never changed how she saw black professionals in white spaces. Diversity seminars that left her assumptions untouched. One Tuesday afternoon in Riverside, her 14 years of racist assumptions collided with someone Officer Whitmore never expected. An African American woman with a doctorate from Stanford, a published author, and a tenured professor. Someone who knew the law, knew her rights, and knew exactly what Whitmore was doing. And that collision would finally end Whitmore's career, cost the city $1.8 million, and expose a department that had tolerated her pattern of racial profiling for nearly a decade and a half. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. An African American woman in her late 40s, Dr. Imani Beaumont, was walking across the main quad at Riverside State University. Dr. Beaumont wasn't just anyone. She was a professor of African American studies, author of 3 critically acclaimed books on race and institutional power, and the director of the university's Center for Social Justice. She'd taught at Riverside State for 12 years. She was carrying her leather messenger bag, heading from her office in the Humanities building toward the library for a faculty meeting. No crime, no trespassing, no suspicious behavior, just walking across campus where she'd worked for over a decade. But Officer Whitmore saw her through a lens warped by 14 years of unchecked racial bias. Couldn't accept that an African American woman on this campus could be a tenured professor. Couldn't imagine that the black woman she was about to confront had a doctorate from Stanford. Couldn't believe that this woman literally shaped policy on this campus, advised the administration, and had more authority here than Whitmore herself. Riverside, California. A mid-sized city about 60 miles east of Los Angeles, population around 330,000. Home to Riverside State University, a respected public institution with 25,000 students. The campus itself sat in the College Heights neighborhood. Tree-lined walkways, Spanish colonial architecture, manicured lawns, student union, modern academic buildings. The kind of place where knowledge was supposed to be valued above all else. The neighborhood around campus was 71% white. The faculty was 78% white. The kind of place where seeing a black woman in professional attire still raised questions for some people. Where African Americans were often assumed to be custodial staff or food service workers, not professors with doctorates. The main quad featured the iconic bell tower, the century-old administration building, and clusters of students between classes, coffee shops, bookstores, academic departments. It was 2:45 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Clear skies, bright California sunshine, mid-70s, perfect autumn weather. Students crisscrossed the quad with backpacks and coffee cups, heading to afternoon classes. Dr. Imani Beaumont had been a professor at Riverside State University for 12 years. 12 years of teaching students about structural racism, systemic inequality, and the persistent reality of discrimination in American institutions. 12 years of publishing research, winning teaching awards, and building one of the most respected African American studies programs in the Western United States. She'd graduated from Howard University magna cum laude, completed her doctorate at Stanford, where she'd been a Ford Foundation Fellow. Her dissertation on race and policing in California had been published by a major university press and was now assigned reading in criminal justice programs nationwide. Her colleagues called her brilliant. Her students called her transformative. Even her critics called her formidable. She believed in education. She believed in justice. She believed that knowledge could challenge power structures and create meaningful change. But she also knew from both professional expertise and personal reality that being black in America meant constantly proving you belonged. That racism didn't stop at degrees or publishing records. That white people, especially those in positions of authority, saw the color before the credentials. That every professional success came with assumptions that you didn't earn it, didn't deserve it, didn't actually belong in that position. That Tuesday afternoon, Imani had finished teaching her 1:00 p.m. seminar on contemporary issues in race and justice. Nothing unusual, nothing exciting, just what she did every Tuesday and Thursday. Lecture, discussion with graduate students, office hours. She'd left her office in the Humanities building around 2:40 p.m., walked down the main staircase, exited through the front doors, and headed across the quad toward the library. The Faculty Senate was meeting at 3:00 p.m. to discuss proposed changes to the university's diversity hiring policies, a topic she'd be presenting on. She'd checked her phone briefly, confirmed the meeting location, and continued walking. She was dressed professionally. Tailored navy blazer, gray slacks, low heels. Her university ID badge was clipped to her blazer lapel, clearly visible. Her leather messenger bag contained her laptop, research files, and the presentation she'd spent a week preparing. She belonged there. She'd worked there for 12 years, had tenure there, had an office, students, colleagues, responsibilities. She was literally walking to a meeting where university leadership would be seeking her expertise on institutional policy. She was doing exactly what thousands of professors do every single day, walking across campus between obligations. Nothing suspicious, nothing unusual, nothing that should attract any attention whatsoever. Nothing that would make anyone look twice at a white professor doing the exact same thing. But Officer Whitmore, 14 years on the Riverside Police Department with 19 complaints documenting her pattern of targeting black professionals, saw something different. Patricia Whitmore had been with Riverside PD since her early 20s, joining the force in 2009. She'd worked various assignments over the years, but spent the last 8 years as one of 2 officers assigned to the university campus. Her supervisors kept her in this assignment despite her complaint history, because, in their words, she knows the campus, parents feel safe with her presence, she has good relationships with campus security. What they meant was that Whitmore stopped every black person she saw who didn't look like a student. Questioned African Americans about their presence on campus, treated black visitors, professionals, and staff like they needed to prove they belonged, made white parents and donors feel protected. 19 complaints in 14 years, 16 of them involving African American individuals. The pattern was unmistakable. A black man in his 30s wearing business attire in the campus parking structure. Officer Whitmore stopped him, demanding ID and proof he was authorized to park there. The man was actually Dr. Kenneth Morrison, an assistant professor of chemistry, parking in his assigned faculty space. Whitmore claimed he matched the description of someone reported near vehicles, even though no such report existed. Complaint filed. Resolved with implicit bias training. An African American woman in her 40s near the administration building. Whitmore detained her, asking what business she had on campus and whether she had authorization to be in that building. The woman was Jasmine Caldwell, assistant to the university president, returning from lunch. Whitmore claimed she wasn't wearing visible identification and appeared uncertain about her destination. Complaint filed. Closed with a written counseling on proper identification of university employees. A black graduate, student outside the engineering building after hours. Whitmore questioned him extensively about why he was on campus at 9 p.m., whether he was actually enrolled, and demanded to see his student ID 3 times, even after he provided it. The student was working late in his lab, as graduate students in STEM programs do constantly. Whitmore claimed the hour was suspicious and she was ensuring campus safety. Complaint filed, dismissed with a diversity awareness workshop requirement. Every complaint told the same story. Whitmore saw African Americans on this predominantly white campus and couldn't accept their legitimacy, couldn't accept that they were professors, administrators, graduate students, or staff members. She assumed they were trespassing, assumed they were unauthorized, assumed they were potentially criminal, assumed they needed to prove they belonged in ways white people on campus never did. She demanded proof of enrollment, proof of employment, proof of authorization, things she never demanded from white people in the same locations doing the same activities. And when complaints were filed, the department responded with training certificates instead of discipline, with workshops instead of consequences, with one more chance instead of reassignment or termination. Internal Affairs had a file on Whitmore that should have resulted in her removal from campus years ago. 19 documented incidents, 3 settlements paid to complainants, 11 credible witnesses, 7 sustained complaints. But Whitmore had allies in the department, supervisors who valued her proactive approach to campus security, union representatives who protected her at every disciplinary hearing, and a system that prioritized officer retention over accountability to the black professionals and students she repeatedly profiled. That afternoon, Whitmore was on patrol near the main quad when she noticed Imani walking across campus. Whitmore's mind made the calculation it always made. Black woman, professional attire, expensive-looking bag, walking with purpose across campus, doesn't look like a student, must not belong here. She didn't consider that this could be a professor between meetings. She didn't notice the university ID badge clearly visible on Imani's blazer. She didn't observe that this woman was walking with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going, because she'd made this walk hundreds of times. She saw what her biases trained her to see. A black woman who didn't belong on this campus. A situation that needed investigation. A potential trespasser. Officer Whitmore pulled her patrol vehicle onto the pedestrian walkway near where Imani was walking. Do you think universities should have independent oversight of campus police to prevent racial profiling? Drop your answer below. Imani noticed the patrol car's engine slowing, heard footsteps behind her approaching quickly. Her stomach tightened. She'd lived this before. Not here. Not on her own campus, where she was literally a published expert on this exact phenomenon. But she'd studied it, taught it, written about it. She knew exactly what was happening. Here we go. Another white cop who can't imagine I'm a professor. Ma'am, excuse me. I need to ask what you're doing on campus. Imani turned slowly, her hands visible at her sides. Officer, is there a problem? I'm heading to a meeting. Whitmore stepped closer, her hand moving to rest on her utility belt near her weapon. I didn't ask where you're going. I asked what you're doing on this campus. Do you have authorization to be here? I'm Dr. Imani Beaumont. I'm a professor here. I work here. Ma'am, I need to see some identification proving you're affiliated with the university. Imani gestured to her blazer. My university ID is right here on my lapel. You can see it clearly. Whitmore barely glanced at it. That could be anyone's ID. I need to see additional identification and proof of your current authorization. Officer, I've been a professor at this university for 12 years. I'm walking to a faculty senate meeting. My ID badge has my photo, my name, my department, and says faculty right on it. Ma'am, we've had reports of unauthorized persons on campus. I need you to provide your driver's license and explain what business you have here. Imani felt her jaw tighten, but kept her voice level. Reports of unauthorized persons? What persons? What reports? And I've already explained. I'm a professor. I teach in the Humanities Building. I direct the Center for Social Justice. I have tenure at this institution. The Center for what? Ma'am, I'm going to need you to provide identification now, or I'll have to detain you for trespassing. Trespassing? On the campus where I'm employed? Officer, what is your reasonable suspicion that I'm trespassing? What crime have you observed me commit? What specific articulable facts support this stop? Whitmore's expression hardened. Your attitude is making this worse. Cooperate, or you'll be detained. Imani reached into her bag slowly, maintaining eye contact. She pulled out her wallet and handed over her driver's license and her university faculty card. Whitmore examined them with exaggerated skepticism. These could be forged. How do I know you actually work here? You could call campus security. You could call the humanities department. You could call the provost's office. Or you could look at the university directory on your phone. My photo, office number, and credentials are all listed publicly. I don't have time to make phone calls for everyone who can't prove they belong here. Imani's voice remained calm, but her words sharpened. Officer, I'm an expert on constitutional law and policing. I teach courses on this. I've published research on this. You've detained me without reasonable suspicion. You've demanded identification without probable cause. You've rejected clear evidence of my legitimate presence. This is a Fourth Amendment violation, and it's racial profiling. Ma'am, if you continue to be uncooperative, I've provided my identification. I've explained my presence. I've complied with every request. What you're calling uncooperative is actually me asserting my constitutional rights, while you refuse to accept that a black woman can be a professor. Within 4 minutes, a campus security vehicle pulled up. Then, a second patrol car. Sergeant Luis Martinez stepped out, a 16-year veteran of Riverside PD, who'd reviewed Whitmore's file multiple times and pushed for her reassignment. He'd worked with campus police, knew the faculty, and immediately recognized what he was seeing. A black woman in professional attire, clearly displaying a university ID, being detained by Whitmore near the main academic buildings. He'd seen this pattern before in her complaint file. Whitmore, what's the situation? Suspicious person on campus, Sarge. She claims to be a professor, but I need to verify her authorization. Martinez looked at Imani's ID badge, still clearly visible on her blazer. That's a faculty ID badge. He took her university card, examined it, and pulled out his phone. Within 90 seconds, he'd confirmed it with the campus directory. Dr. Beaumont is a tenured professor in African American Studies. She's the director of the Center for Social Justice. She's been faculty here for 12 years. Whitmore hesitated. IDs can be stolen, Sarge. I was just being thorough. Thorough? Her badge has her photo. Her university card matches. The directory confirms it. What was your initial reasonable suspicion for this stop? Dispatch mentioned reports of unauthorized persons. What reports? When? I've heard no such dispatch. Whitmore faltered. It was earlier. Or I thought I heard. So you stopped a faculty member walking across campus with visible university identification because you thought you maybe heard something earlier that you can't actually cite. By now, 2 students had stopped to watch, phones out. A white professor in his 60s approached from the library steps. Is there a problem here? That's Dr. Beaumont. She's supposed to be at our faculty meeting right now. Within 10 minutes, Lieutenant Commander David Ashford arrived, a 22-year veteran who'd tried to remove Whitmore from campus assignment 3 years earlier and been overruled by the chief. He stepped out and immediately assessed the scene. A respected professor, surrounded by students and faculty. Body cameras running. Witnesses recording. The exact scenario he'd warned would happen if Whitmore remained on campus. He listened to Martinez's briefing, examined Imani's credentials, spoke with the faculty witness, and reviewed the complete absence of reasonable suspicion. His expression hardened. He'd spent 3 years documenting Whitmore's pattern. He'd written memos warning this would happen. He'd pushed for her reassignment and been blocked. He turned to Whitmore with an expression of finality. Badge and weapon. Now. Whitmore's face went pale. Commander, I was just 19 complaints, Officer Whitmore. 16 of them involving African American professionals in settings where they had every right to be. And you just profiled a tenured professor on her own campus, in front of witnesses, with cameras running, because you couldn't accept that a black woman belongs in faculty. I had reasonable suspicion. You had bias. You had assumptions. You had racism. You didn't have reasonable suspicion, probable cause, or any legal justification whatsoever. Badge and weapon. You're on administrative leave effective immediately. But let's be clear. Your career is over. Whitmore handed them over, her hands shaking. Commander Ashford turned to Imani. Dr. Beaumont, on behalf of Riverside Police Department, I apologize. This was completely inappropriate. This was racial profiling. This was a violation of your rights. Officer Whitmore will be placed on administrative leave pending investigation, but I'll be recommending immediate termination. If you choose to file a complaint or pursue legal action, and you absolutely should, the department will cooperate fully. This pattern should have ended years ago. Imani looked at Whitmore, then at Commander Ashford, taking a moment to gather her thoughts. Commander, I've been a professor for 15 years. I've taught constitutional law. I've published 3 books on race and institutional power. I've advised police departments on racial bias. And your officer just treated me like a trespasser on my own campus for walking to a faculty meeting. She gestured toward her blazer. I'm wearing a visible ID badge. I provided additional identification. I explained my presence, and Officer Whitmore refused to believe any of it because she couldn't accept that a black woman in professional attire on this campus might actually be a professor. I teach this. I write about this. I research patterns of racial profiling in institutional settings. And Officer Whitmore just gave me a case study in how bias operates even when confronted with clear contradictory evidence. She gestured toward the students with phones. Everything is documented. The lack of reasonable suspicion, the rejection of clear identification, the racial profiling. All of it. So yes, I'll be filing a complaint. And yes, I'll be pursuing legal action. Not primarily for money, but because if this happens to me, a tenured professor with institutional support, legal expertise, and resources, imagine what happens to black students on this campus who don't have my position or platform. How many black students has Officer Whitmore stopped on this campus? How many African American staff members has she questioned? How many visitors has she profiled who couldn't fight back? How many complaints would it have taken before someone finally acted? By that evening, the story was spreading through Riverside State's campus and into local news. Video. Clips from students' phones went viral. Hashtag Professor profiled and racial profiling. ATRSU started trending. Tenured professor racially profiled by campus police officer. Officer with 19 complaints caught on camera profiling black faculty member. Stanford PhD. Detained for trespassing on campus where she's taught for 12 years. Students. Faculty describe obvious racial profiling by campus officer. The university community responded immediately and forcefully. Riverside State University issued a statement supporting Dr. Beaumont, calling the incident completely unacceptable and antithetical to our values of inclusion and respect. The Faculty Senate passed an emergency resolution condemning the incident and demanding immediate termination of the officer and review of all campus police procedures. The Black Student Union organized a demonstration with over 800 students demanding Whitmore's permanent removal from campus and independent oversight of campus police. Even the Campus College Republicans chapter issued a statement defending Dr. Beaumont, calling the stop clearly unjustified and concerning. The university received hundreds of calls and emails supporting Imani, along with demands that the police department face real consequences. Dr. Beaumont hired Marcus Chen, a prominent civil rights attorney who'd won several major racial profiling cases against California law enforcement agencies. The lawsuit was filed 3 weeks later, naming Officer Patricia Whitmore, her supervisors who'd ignored 19 complaints over 14 years, Commander Ashford, though only nominally, as he'd tried to remove her, and Riverside Police Department. The allegations were comprehensive. Racial profiling in violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Unlawful detention without reasonable suspicion or probable cause in violation of the Fourth Amendment denial of civil rights, under 42 U.S.C., Citer 1983, intentional infliction of emotional distress, false imprisonment, supervisory liability for failure to train, discipline, or terminate. Despite documented pattern, municipal liability for deliberate indifference to Officer Whitmore's pattern of racial profiling. Violation of California civil rights statutes. The complaint included Whitmore's entire history, presented in devastating detail. 19 complaints over 14 years, 16 involving African American professionals, students, or staff in similar circumstances, on campus, in professional settings, in predominantly white spaces. All documented, all investigated, all resulting in minimal discipline. all dismissed with training that never changed her behavior. The lawsuit laid out the pattern systematically, showing complaint after complaint, year after year. Black victim after black victim, similar circumstances, similar assumptions, similar harassment, $1.8 million in damages, plus attorney fees and mandatory policy reforms. Riverside city attorneys reviewed the case. The evidence was overwhelming. Campus, security footage showed everything. Imani walking across campus with visible ID, the unjustified stop, the escalation despite compliance. Body camera footage captured Whitmore's inability to articulate reasonable suspicion and her rejection of clear documentary evidence. Multiple independent witnesses corroborated the account. Dr. Beaumont's credentials, university ID, and 12-year employment record proved her complete legitimacy. Officer Whitmore had no legal basis for the stop, no crime, no reasonable suspicion, no articulable facts beyond seeing a black woman on campus. Internal affairs files documented the pattern, 19 complaints with 16 involving African Americans showing systematic racial bias. Every element of a Power 1983 claim was present. Fourth Amendment violation? Check. 14th Amendment violation? Check. Municipal liability for deliberate indifference? Check. Qualified immunity? Unlikely to apply given clear precedent against racial profiling. The city's risk assessment was clear. Go to trial and lose publicly, with a jury verdict potentially 3 times higher, or settle now and implement reforms. The city settled 8 months later. $1.8 million paid to Dr. Imani Beaumont, one of the largest settlements in Riverside's history for racial profiling. Officer Patricia Whitmore was terminated 4 weeks after the incident. The union initially filed grievances, but withdrew after reviewing the body camera footage, witness statements, and the undeniable pattern in Whitmore's complaint history. The termination letter was comprehensive. Officer Whitmore engaged in racial profiling, detaining a faculty member based solely on race without reasonable suspicion or probable cause. She violated department policy on constitutional policing, bias-free policing, and proper detention procedures. She has demonstrated a pattern over 14 years of similar conduct, indicating this was not an isolated incident, but persistent failure to respect the civil rights of African American citizens. Her continued employment creates unacceptable liability for the city and violates the civil rights of citizens, particularly African American community members and university affiliates. The letter specifically cited 16 prior complaints showing the same racial profiling pattern, noting that progressive discipline had completely failed to modify behavior. Employment terminated immediately without appeal rights due to the severity of constitutional violations combined with the documented pattern. Patricia Whitmore's name was entered into the National Decertification Index, preventing her from ever working in law enforcement again, anywhere in the country. Her 14-year law enforcement career ended permanently. No pension enhancements, no retirement in good standing, no law enforcement work anywhere. Dr. Imani Beaumont testified before Riverside City Council at a packed hearing 3 months after the incident. Dozens of supporters filled the room. Students, faculty, community activists, local NAACP leadership. People wore professor-profiled buttons. The media documented every word. I'm a professor. I've dedicated 15 years to teaching students about structural racism, about how bias operates in institutions, about constitutional rights and police accountability. I've worked at Riverside State for 12 years. I've published 3 books. I've won teaching awards. I've built programs that this university promotes in recruitment materials. I know my rights. I know the Constitution because I teach it. I know what unlawful stops look like because I've researched hundreds of them. I know what racial profiling is because I've written about it, testified about it, advised departments on how to prevent it. And Officer Whitmore stopped me for walking to a faculty meeting while black. She stopped me on my own campus, where I'm tenured faculty, where my office is, where I've taught thousands of students. She looked at my visible university ID badge and said it could belong to anyone. She examined my faculty card and suggested it might be forged. She dismissed my explanation because she couldn't accept that a black woman on this campus could actually be a professor. I was humiliated in front of my students. I was treated like a criminal on campus where I shape policy. I was detained for walking across the quad, something white professors do 100 times a day without anyone questioning their right to exist there. She paused, looking at each council member. 19 complaints over 14 years, 16 of them involving African Americans. That's not bad luck. That's not isolated incidents. That's not a few misunderstandings. That's a pattern. That's policy. That's the department tolerating racism for 14 years because Officer Whitmore's supervisors valued her proactive approach over the constitutional rights of black people. A pattern your department tolerated for 14 years because supervisors wanted campus parents to feel safe. And apparently, to some people, safe means keeping black people who don't look like students under constant suspicion. She paused. $1.8 million is what it costs to finally remove one officer who should have been fired a decade ago. But money doesn't undo standing outside the library, in front of my students, being treated like I don't belong on a campus where I've taught for 12 years. It doesn't erase explaining to my teenage daughter why a police officer treated her mother like a criminal for going to work. And it doesn't prevent the next officer with 19 complaints from doing the same thing to the next victim who can't fight back. This council needs to ask itself, why did it take 19 complaints? Why did it take a tenured professor? Why did it take someone with my resources, platform, and legal expertise to finally get action? And what happened to all the black students, staff members, and visitors Whitmore profiled who didn't have my position or power to fight back? Standing ovation from supporters. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Riverside Police Department announced policy reforms 6 months later under pressure from the lawsuit, university leadership, and community demands. The chief acknowledged the need for significant changes to prevent future incidents and restore community trust. Automatic supervisory review after 2 complaints with similar patterns within 36 months. Mandatory termination proceedings after 3 sustained complaints involving racial profiling. Real-time flagging system for officers with patterns of stops involving racial disparities. Mandatory supervisor approval for any campus stop involving only suspicious person. Concerns without specific criminal activity. Body camera footage. Review of 100% of stops involving minority individuals in predominantly white settings. Anti-racism training conducted by community civil rights organizations and scholars like Dr. Beaumont, not police trainers. Command staff accountability. Supervisors who ignore complaint patterns face discipline up to termination. Independent Civilian Oversight Board with subpoena power to review complaint patterns. Quarterly public reporting of stops by officer, race, location, and outcome. Integration of national decertification. Index checks to prevent hiring officers terminated for racial profiling elsewhere. Why do departments wait for complaint 19 instead of acting on complaint 3? Why does it take a lawsuit to implement common sense accountability? Comment your thoughts. Reforms to be fully implemented within 9 months, with progress reports every quarter. This wasn't about one Tuesday afternoon. This wasn't about one confrontation on a college campus. This was about a department that let Patricia Whitmore profile black professionals for 14 years despite 9 documented complaints showing a clear pattern of racial profiling. The pattern was obvious from complaint 2. A black physician questioned in a faculty parking lot. An African American administrator detained outside the building where she worked. It was undeniable by complaint 7. Same story, different victim, same bias, different day, same assumptions, different location. But Riverside PD kept Whitmore on campus patrol, kept assigning her to predominantly white settings, kept ignoring the warnings, kept accepting the excuses until she finally profiled someone with the knowledge, platform, and resources to force accountability. Dr. Imani Beaumont paid the price, treated like a trespasser on her own campus, detained for walking to a faculty meeting, humiliated in front of students for existing while black in a professional setting. The message delivered clearly: your doctorate doesn't matter. Your publications don't matter. Your 12 years of teaching don't matter as much as your race. Patricia Whitmore's career is over. Terminated. Decertified. Barred from law enforcement permanently. That's consequence. The city paid $1.8 million. That's accountability. The department implemented reforms. That's progress. But those measures came after 14 years and 19 complaints. 14 years of black victims who didn't have Imani's tenured position, legal expertise, and institutional support. 14 years of African American students, staff, and visitors who were profiled and had no recourse. No platform, no resources, no one listening. How many black students did Whitmore stop in those 14 years? How many African American staff members did she question about belonging? How many visitors did she profile who couldn't fight back? How many complaints were never filed because people knew nothing would change? The real question isn't why Officer Whitmore did this. Racists will racist. The question is why the system let her keep doing it. Why do departments wait for complaint 19 instead of acting on complaint 3? Why do they recognize patterns after 16 similar incidents instead of stopping them after 5? Why do they prioritize protecting officers with documented bias over protecting the black citizens those officers target? Why does it take a tenured professor, someone with credentials white people respect, to finally get accountability? Why do settlements come from taxpayer money while officers who cause them face no financial consequences? Because if we don't fix the system that kept Patricia Whitmore on a university campus for 14 years, if we don't address the culture that protected her, despite the pattern, if we don't acknowledge that implicit bias training doesn't work on people determined not to change, then we're just waiting for the next officer with 19 complaints. The next black professional. The next African American citizen who gets profiled for existing while black. This case represents thousands of others that never make news. Tens of thousands of black Americans profiled every year by officers who never face consequences. Millions of stops based on race, not crime. A system where being black in a white space is treated as reasonable suspicion. Comment if 3 strikes should be national policy. Any officer with 3 similar complaints within 3 years faces automatic termination. No implicit bias training that doesn't work. No diversity workshops that change nothing. No progressive discipline that protects racism. Career over. Out of law enforcement permanently. 3 complaints. 3 similar incidents. 3 African Americans profiled in similar circumstances. That's not isolated incidents. That's a pattern. And patterns should end careers, not black people's dignity and constitutional rights. And if you believe these stories matter, if you think 14 years of complaints should result in accountability before year 15, if you believe black professors deserve the same presumption of belonging that white people get automatically, then hit that subscribe button. We're exposing police misconduct. We're demanding real accountability. We're fighting for every black American who's been profiled and every victim who couldn't fight back. This isn't about one officer or one professor. It's about a system that gave Patricia Whitmore 19 chances, 19 complaints, 16 black victims, 14 years, while black Americans don't even get the benefit of the doubt. It's about departments that protect officers with documented patterns of racial profiling, and the African American professionals who pay the price for that protection with their dignity, their safety, and their constitutional rights.